You know
Dan,
what?
did you meet
Let me move
Melissa?
back. Let me
Wait.
move back.
No, she's.
Tom, you're here. I'm just
Yeah.
keeping your
Why don't we?
phone
Yeah. I'll meet her when we
Yeah.
get into closed session. Okay. Why don't we start our proceedings this morning? Yeah. Okay. This meeting of the California High-Speed Rail Authority will be called to order. Would you please call the roll?
Vice Chair Schenk.
Here.
Vice Chair Richards.
Here.
Mr. Umberg.
Here.
Mr. Hartnett.
Here.
Chairman Richard.
Here.
Thank you.
Let me just explain the order of the proceedings this morning. We are going to have a closed session first. We commence all our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance, and we will do that now. We also want to have a remembrance of our fallen Americans on today, 9/11. But I'm going to defer that until we start our open session because I want members of the public to be here for that. With that, let's commence with the Pledge of Allegiance. I would ask Mr. Umberg, who served our country in Afghanistan, to please lead us.
All rise. Hand over your heart. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this point, the board will enter into a closed session to discuss matters as delineated on our agenda. I'm going to anticipate, Mr. Falens, probably about 1 hour, would you think, or less than that?
Yes, 1 hour.
Okay, so for members of the public who are here, or members of the public who are watching the proceedings, that's our anticipated time to reconvene in open public session. So with that, we'll enter into closed session. Thank you. Good morning. The board will now reconvene in open session. We have no items to report from our closed session. Ladies and gentlemen, before we move to the first item on our agenda, which is public comment, as we all know, today is September 11th, and that is a date that has meaning that does not need to be explained to any American. We of the board believe it would be very appropriate that prior to commencing our proceedings today, if you'll all join us in standing, observing a moment of silence for fallen Americans both on that day and the thousands who've died afterwards protecting our country. Thank you. We'll begin now with the public comment section of our agenda. As we do in each case, we will take the comments in the order in which they have been received. We do afford an opportunity for public and elected officials to go first, but I do not see among the cards any such persons this morning. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Oh, excuse me. That's not correct. Our first speaker will be County Supervisor Richard Valley from Kings County. Good morning, Supervisor.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of the board. Mr. Chair, as you know, in Kings County right now, our Board of Supervisors, they're in a public session right now. My members are on the dais and meeting with the public, and my chair is empty up there right now because, once again, I just find it necessary to travel here, to be here at your meeting, to say very simply that the plan for Kings County does not work. And, Mr. Chair, you've, up until a couple of months ago, you were coming and meeting with the Board of Supervisors and the folks of Kings County, a regular monthly meeting. You've seen and heard those concerns from those folks, hundreds of them. So when I say that the plan does not work for Kings County, I don't feel that I need to go into detail this morning because you're aware and on the record. I have also read your latest letter to me and the board stating your reasons for not coming the last couple of months, and we haven't had that opportunity to engage with you. More importantly, the folks of Kings County haven't had that opportunity to engage with you, I believe, the last 2 months. So I am here again on the record to urge you to come back. Look forward to seeing you back. That is the best setting so far, Mr. Chair, is those meetings with you there with us versus the informational panel hearings that your staff comes down to our communities and puts out. I haven't seen anything positive coming out of those. I do go, I listen to what concerned folks in the city of Corcoran and Hanford have to say about these maps, these possible alignments. So again, in closing, look forward to seeing you back in Kings County, sir. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Supervisor. And let me just say, as I indicated in my letter, now that the environmental documents have been issued, we're all constrained by the formal requirements to comply with the comment periods there. But I want to assure you and your colleagues on the board, as well as your constituents, that we are fully engaged in reviewing and thinking about the issues in Kings County and along the entire alignment. I certainly will be back in Kings County. We will continue within the bounds of what we're allowed to do to work as as proactively as we can with you and your colleagues. And I know this is a long trip for you, but I know your commitment to protecting the citizens in your community, and I just want to assure you that we will do everything that we can do, within the confines of our current environmental review period. But please be assured we would like to continue to work as hard as we can to see if we can find some way to find common ground.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Okay, going in order, I, again, don't see any other elected officials, so we'll go in the order in which the comments were received. First is Ms. Leanne Ager from the Fresno Economic Development Commission. Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome back, and congratulations on your award. You weren't here for us to be able to say the accolades, but they were said here.
Thank you.
First of all, I just want to tell you that Supervisor Perea is not here today. His mother is very, very ill, and he didn't feel comfortable leaving Fresno today, but he certainly wanted to remind you about the heavy maintenance facility issues, and that's always on his mind in the utmost. I did want to talk to you a little bit about what's going on in Fresno, and obviously it's been very busy. I think I want to thank you, Mr. Morales, for hiring Mr. Padilla. He has been in Fresno at every meeting, and I think we've been speed dating lately. Yes, we've been seeing each other everywhere. And one of our main issues is making sure that our local folks get hired, and I know that's certainly for everybody in the Central Valley that's on the top of our list. We have been hearing about some barriers of getting our local companies and our local folks hired, and we understand that you're working on those. We are working on those also in making sure that our small businesses get certified. I think there's been about 5 workshops in the last 60 days, and we have a few more planned. One of them that the EDC and the city and the county are planning is in November, and hopefully that will be a large one so that we can get our businesses there. I have been getting phone calls from local businesses saying that there are some issues that they've been hearing, that they're not qualified to work on the project, and hopefully you'll be able to work on those. And I appreciate the fact that you understand those issues and that you're working on those for our businesses, because we really do want to make sure that what we have promised them all along, that there are places for them on this project, whether or not they are construction workers or whether or not that they're the folks that put out the signs, like the Lurda company, that there is a place for them, that they will be able to contract with whoever gets hired. So we appreciate your work, and we're working hard on the other side.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Our next speaker is Robert Allen. As Bob comes to the podium, I'll point out Mr. Allen was a longtime member of the board of the BART system, Bay Area Rapid Transit System, and unfortunately before September 11th took on the terrible meaning that it now has. It also was the date that BART opened its doors 40 years ago today. So, Mr. Allen, good morning.
That's right, 40 years of wonderful service to the public. The banded rail system that you plan is dangerous. It means up to 43 grade crossings in perpetuity. Problems are indicated on the handout. It endangers Caltrain passengers on station platforms. It is costly. It is ineffective. It's unsafe for high speed. It has poor and congested public access. I urge you to stay clear of Caltrain. Instead, to upgrade and grade separate the Amtrak route via Mulford from Santa Clara north to a new West Oakland intermodal station where BART crosses over the UP Amtrak line. That you seek a 5-county JPA or expand BART to upgrade the comprehensive 1957 Rapid Transit Commission's report to the legislature and develop a balanced 5-county plan for rapid transit under one management. The plan should include the Mulford line, East Rail as I've indicated above, a new West Oakland intermodal station where BART crosses over the UP, a revised plan for BART from Berryessa to Santa Clara. Grade separating and converting to Caltrain to BART for about 30 miles between Millbrae and Santa Clara, 25 miles at grade, 5 miles in cut. Convert Caltrain to San Francisco Muni Airport access line north from Millbrae. And I guess that's it. The others are all in the handout that I gave to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. The next card actually doesn't have the speaker's name on it, but I'm going to guess, Mr. Dolan, is this you from Western States Title? Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations again for the awards you won in Washington with Transportation Secretary and Mike Rossi. We appreciate that you got that award. I have 4 quick points to make today. I am Daniel Dolan. I was one of 173 people 1 year ago that participated in a conference call regarding the $40 million RFP on right-of-way acquisitions and appraisals. So I was excited to think that Patricia Jones and Ms. Schmidt were going to give a presentation on item 6, only to find out that's been modified. I wanted to also thank Jeff Morales, your executive director, how important his presence was at 6 o'clock Thursday, July 5th, when, as I now understand it from Mark Leno's office, that he made sure that there was bipartisan support for withdrawing for the purposes of the vote the next day. There was the Senate journal entry whereby high-speed rail wasn't going to pursue at that particular point in time an exemption on CEQA. By him making that comment, at least 2 Democratic senators, I believe Joe Correa and also Senator Lois Walk, were persuaded to vote in your favor, and that was just enough to get the $8 billion package passed in the Senate and to get your share of the state monies. So that brings me up to an important reminder to everyone here in this room to vote on November 2nd or 6th. The presidential election and the U.S. Congress Senate election is very important, and you need to do everything you can to secure that federal $3.3 billion by any means you can before Election Day, in case the party that you hope is in power is not in power. One quick thing here.
If I could ask you to finish quickly.
To share with Mike Rossi and Dan Richard, this map and elegant design that I have for a project that Governor Brown is interested in will also be a big step for you to deal with all of these Union Pacific Railroad cross sections. There might be a possibility that some of those might be relaxed in your favor if you can support me on this project to the governor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dolan. Thank you. The next speaker is Jim Bigelow, to be followed by Diana Lacombe. Morning, Mr.
Good morning. Jim Bigelow with the Redwood City San Mateo County Chamber, and I want to present some positive things on the Caltrain. Caltrain is just busting through 50,000 passengers a day and growing, and that's a very positive sign. Your board, the legislature, and the agencies to the MOU for the blended system recognize the benefit of taking the first step for joint operations in the future on the San Francisco Peninsula with Caltrain and high-speed rail. Next Tuesday, Caltrain will be hosting a meeting of all the cities on the Caltrain corridor. And with the idea is, how do we electrify Caltrain? How do we get ready for the future opportunity to share the tracks with high-speed rail? That's a major thing, and some of the cities will need to leave their baggage at the door and think about building the high-speed and getting ready and getting Caltrain electrified, which is the first step. So there's a lot of positive things. The studies at the at-grade crossings is underway with the 2035 figures. And so there's a lot of positive things going on. And in San Mateo County, we even have some cities approaching our half-cent sales tax agency to start some grade separation planning up in San Mateo. And as a result of that, all of the cities in San Mateo are going to get a letter requesting their interest in grade separations, which is above and beyond the $1.5 billion funding. So thank you again, Chair Richard, for your leadership and your extra hours. And I know the board has put in some extra hours, and we welcome Mr. Morales to continue this effort. Thank you.
Thank you. I know you didn't mean to overlook Mr. Hartnett, who has put in a lot of hours on the Caltrain electrification. Ms. Lacombe, I am sorry that I have been...
That's okay. I'll catch you a little later.
I know, you'll tackle me. So anyway, welcome. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Richard, Authority Board members, and CEO Morales. This morning I'd like to comment on 2 agenda items, 7, 8, and other issues that I have previously brought to your attention. The first issue is item 7, the high-speed rail conflict of interest policy. And I'm going to get right to the point. The most serious and blatant issue to bring to your attention is on page 6, number 2, failure to comply. And I've given you all copies of this. And it reads as follows. If the authority determines in its sole discretion that a contractor has failed to comply with this policy in any respect, including any failure to disclose an actual, perceived, or potential conflict of interest, the authority may do blah, 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 blah. If the contractor was or should have been aware and failed to disclose the conflict of interest prior to the award, the authority could do all of these things also. If the authority cancels a contract as specified, it will have no obligation, responsibility, or liability to reimburse all or parts of the costs incurred or alleged to have been incurred by the contractor. And it goes on. It seems that this organizational conflict of interest is 100% biased in favor of the high-speed rail. The tone of failure to comply and the authority's sole discretion is reflected throughout this document. Our members reviewing this agenda item could not locate one reference that contractors are entitled to an appeal process. On the contrary, it goes throughout with sole discretion throughout, and it says at one point that it's the authority's decision is final and binding and shall not be subject to appeal. To our knowledge, contractors are still entitled to due process in the state of California. I recommend that this item be deferred to either the Authority Executive Board or the Business Council for review. I have one more quick item. On number 8, all we want to say is that please include the 30% small business goal first and foremost on your RFQ. And I've stated all the recommendations per each item, page number and so on, that we're making to this board. And there's a couple of other things, but I will assume that that's taken care of.
Thank you, Ms. Lacombe.
Thank you.
We'll come back to those questions during the consideration of those items. Next is Richard Markison, followed by Paul Smart, and then David Schwegel.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. Mr. Morales, it's good to see you again, sir. I represent a number of contractor groups and listened with great interest to the folks from Fresno talking about local participation. We're a little bit concerned about the authority given to the executive director under your agenda item number 9. And one of the questions that I would have for you, sir, and the board during the discussion is whether the phrase all that is necessary includes the authority to negotiate and execute a project labor agreement for the construction work on the project. As I'm sure you are aware, project labor agreements are a very controversial issue in California for construction. I represent a variety of construction contractor groups who are opposed to project labor agreements. We think that they actually work contrary to the purposes that have been mentioned for local hire and small business participation, and would appreciate some clarity from the board as to if the authority has plans for a project labor agreement and if that would be covered under this authority given to the CEO. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Paul Smart, followed by David Schwagel, followed by Jack Caswell.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members. My name is Paul Smart. I'm a resident of Corcoran in Kings County. Recently, I was, reading your new environmental justice policy that was adopted, and under the principles and goals section, something stuck out to me. It says to avoid, minimize, or mitigate disproportionately high human health and environmental effects, including social and economic effects on minority and low-income populations. I believe wholeheartedly that Corcoran embodies the entire spirit of that statement. The corner of Whitley Avenue in Otis is home to a senior citizens and disabled persons complex. Many of these people live on fixed incomes. They do not have the ability to drive. High-speed rail coming through this area will eliminate our Amtrak. You will effectively take away the ability for many seniors and disabled people to travel for doctor's appointments, groceries, and necessities, things like seeing their family. Corcoran's population is largely classified as minority, low income. Matter of fact, according to your own report, 80.8% minority. The removal of any jobs in a community that is already low income, minority based, and has an annual unemployment rate of over 15% shows a lack of consideration for that community in regards to environmental justice. The study includes inmates in the part of our population. You bolster Corcoran having more than 20,000 in their population. That includes people that are incarcerated. Our actual citizen number is closer to 13,000. Now, those would dramatically change the effects of the environmental justice if those people, the inmates, were not included in that statement. The displacements, along with the increased noise and visual impacts associated with the high-speed train project, could affect social interactions, community cohesion, and the perceived quality of life in Corcoran. This effect would be of moderate to substantial intensity under NEPA. If your own report shows how detrimental this project is to Corcoran, stop. Find another place to put it that won't be so detrimental. This is where I grew up, and I'm trying to protect my home. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Smart. David Schwagel, followed by Jack Caswell, and then Nicole Gary.
Good morning, fellow leaders. David Schwagel, USHSR, the nation's only nonprofit advocating for a nationwide high-speed rail network to be constructed in phases between now and 2030. Thank you for your valuable contributions to the success of our June 2010 Los Angeles and May 2012 San Francisco conferences. On the subject of communication and outreach, it is definitely a challenging issue because we are changing a message that has been ingrained in our American society since the American suburban living dream of the 40s and the Great American Streetcar Scandal of the 60s. As mentioned before, there's a high-speed rail television series coming online. They also have a video series that's coming online where people are providing testimonies on why they like high-speed rail. And there is a third development which higher-ups from USHSR will be discussing with your staff later on this month. With regard to small businesses, one of our big barriers in meeting that 30% small business participation goal is primes getting locked into their specific agenda. And I want to encourage the primes to embrace out-of-the-box thinking, to see the extraordinary talents that some of those subs have to offer. For example, there may be some innovations with regards to the treatment of the right-of-way, for example, with solarization of the right-of-way where we can get away with not having that overhead catenary. So I really want to encourage the synergistic thinking, flexible thinking on the part of the primes so that we can meet those 30% small business participation goals. And finally, I want to encourage us to expand our outreach to the American Society of Civil Engineers. They represent 140,000 civil engineers worldwide, and I'm sure they'd be interested in getting some insight on project financing at their Montreal conference coming up on the 18th to the 20th of October. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schragle. Next speaker, Mr. Jack Caswell, followed by Ms. Nicole Gehring.
Good morning, board members. I've been pursuing a question and a clearly defined set of procedures and rules for the authority over the construction inspection, plan review, shop inspection, and environmental monitoring procedures, and under whose authority those services would answer to. I attended a meeting in Fresno, and I was told by the authority representatives there that it would be the responsibility of the developer to provide those services, but I have not seen a clearly defined set of rules where they would send out notifications for requests for qualifications, requests for proposals, and then have a competitive bid process for providing those services to the rail authority or under the developer's authority. And what I'd like to do is be able to get some kind of information if that QA/QC process conformance assessment will fall under that authority of the developer, whoever that is that's chosen, or under the rail authority's direction, which would seem logical since you own the responsibility to ensure to the public that quality control, quality assessment meets laws, ordinances, regulations, and standards. Hope to hear some clearly defined sets of rules. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to ask Mr. Trujillo, who works directly for Mr. Morales, to seek you out and see if we can help you get information that you're looking for.
All right. Thank you very much.
Next, Nicole Gehring, followed by Frank Oliveira, followed by Ross Browning. Ms. Gehring? I hope I pronounced that correctly. Goehring?
I think she stepped outside, sir.
All right. If she comes back, would you just have her see the staff here to get back in the queue, if she's still here during the public comment period. Next will be Frank Oliveira, followed by Ross Browning, followed by our last card, Alan Scott. Good morning, Mr. Oliveira.
Good morning. As you know, my name is Frank Oliveira, and I'm representing Citizens for California High-Speed Rail Accountability. Mr. Hartnett, Mr. Umberg, Mr. Morales, Mr. Richards, and Ms. Schenk, we've always talked about due process. Every time I've showed up here, I've been talking about due process. Due process under the law is important. The California High-Speed Rail Authority is required to follow the law. You have to comply with CEQA processing and NEPA processing. You've entered into a 90-day review period, comment review period, which has set some deadlines, hearings, workshops in motion. We've asked for information, but 14,000 pages of information is missing. They're the technical reports that support the assumptions that were made in the 4,800-page volumes 1, 2, and 3 that were released to the public. For us to effectively review this project and understand the assumptions that the authority has made in this project, we have to be able to review those technical reports. Volumes 1, 2, and 3 reference over and over different technical reports. They are available on your website if you have a high-speed internet connection. The common person should not be required to have a high-speed internet connection to participate in this project. You need to release the 14,000 pages so that people can review these documents. They need to be released in languages that are spoken in those areas, because we are a multicultural area. They probably should be released in Spanish also, English and Spanish, and perhaps Hmong. I implore you folks to withdraw the EIS, EIR, put out all the information you want us to review that we're legally obligated, entitled to have, and start again, and give us 90 days to review all of the documents that we should be reviewing. This is an environmental justice issue. You're required under NEPA and your own policy to carry that out. I've provided you a letter stating the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oliveira. Ross Browning, then Alan Scott. Morning, Mr. Browning.
Good morning, members of the board and Mr. Chairman. My name is Ross Browning. I'm from Layton, California, small place in Kings County, small county in the state of California. There is a video out now online, which I was looking at the other day, and what it is snippets of property, and we see the line of the train passing through it, various things. And I had never viewed it from this aspect before. One of the things that struck in my mind is that looking at this way, showed the utter and complete devastation of portions of cities, schools, churches, banks, hospitals, police stations, parks, you name it. Then we get out of the cities and into land, farms, crops, dairies, homes, storage facilities, waterways, ponding areas, freshwater recharge basins, ancient riverbeds, historic sites and buildings, railroad crossings, floodplains, irrigation wells and irrigation systems, as well as domestic wells. All of this, while it's bad enough, just pales in significance, and it becomes even more horrific when the effects of overpasses and underpasses are included in this story. The effects of those underpasses and overpasses can multiply the effects by 3. Not since carpet bombing of Europe in World War II has such mass and utter useless destruction of land and property taken place. And all of this for what end? It's not that you're taking it, it's just for what end? One of the courses I had in college, in engineering college, that we fought over quite a bit, and the one thing that we did take away from it was we borrowed from the medical profession, and that is do no harm. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Browning. Alan Scott.
Good morning, members of the board, Mr. Chair.
Good morning, sir.
Last Tuesday, I spoke in Hanford, and Mr. Abercrombie came up to me afterwards, and another gentleman, and stated I made an incorrect statement. And I said, well, I have a tendency to be very suspicious of anything that from the organization has told me because of the different encounters of problems, misinformation, lack of transparency, environmental justice issues, and just in common not following Proposition 1A. What I stated was that in Merced, and I understand they have their final EIR, and the nod has been signed, but the rod has not. And where the station is, and then where the surface parking is, there's an area on the map, and I've got 3 maps. I only had 1 at the time. Now I have 3, and they all have your stamp on them. And it says a secondary impact area. Well, that secondary impact area is probably one of the most egregious environmental justice mistakes around. I was snookered, I believe, by Mr. Abercrombie because I was only going by this map. Well, I now have this map and this map. So 2 of the 3 maps pretty much take out the housing. So I may have misspoke a tiny bit, but in actual fact, I was right. Because whether you take the secondary impact area and you move into that at all the construction that's going to go on in this mass area, because you're building a station there. Now I know someone's going to say, well, we haven't made the decision yet. Hear me out. This is out there. They see it. By the way, I was informed by Mr. Abercrombie when I asked him the question at the end of his telling me I was wrong, And I said, bottom line is, do you think these people were notified? And he told me very simply, you may be right, they were notified. Well, this is a disadvantaged, predominantly Hispanic neighborhood that in one of the documents you guys submitted has 0 population. There's 30 homes there. I think there's a major, major issue here, and it needs to be resolved. And I don't want to get into simple, silly semantics. The bottom line is you got 3 maps. 2 said they're going. The third one says we're going to build out around you, but you have not made any effort to eliminate or provide mitigation to these people, or even simple communication, which has been an issue since over the last 18 months that I've been involved with this project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Ms. Gehring, did you return to the room?
She has returned, sir.
She has not? Okay, well, we're about to close the public comment session. So with that, the public comment session is closed, and we'll move on to the other items on the agenda. First up is the approval of the meeting minutes from the August 2nd meeting. It's moved by Vice Chair Schenk and seconded by Vice Chair Richards.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If I may.
It's like, don't hold your hand up like that at an auction. You may buy a 57
Actually, I was
Yeah. Mr. Richards?
I would just like to ask that on...
Microphone.
Sorry.
I think you have to, yeah.
I just would like to ask on agenda item number 2 if you would note that I recused myself and left the room during that portion of the hearing. Thank you.
Okay, can we make that change?
With that, I'll second it.
Okay. I'm just looking for. Okay. I will vote to approve the minutes as well, even though I was not at the meeting, just because we have a quorum for that. So, the Secretary, please call the roll.
Vice Chair Schenk? Yes. Vice Chair Richards?
Yes.
Mr. Umberg?
Aye.
Mr. Hartnett?
Yes.
Chairman Richard?
Yes. Okay. Item 3 is the Industry Forum update. Ms. Padilla, Ms. Fonseca? Oh, I'm sorry. It says P. Padilla. Okay. Excuse me. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Chairman Richards, members of the board. Still getting used to this, but my name is Robert Padilla with the California High-Speed Rail Authority, small business advocate. I'm here to report on the industry forums that were held. I believe you have this in your packet. This particular one that I'll be introducing will be the one held most recently in August. First of all, the purpose of the forums really were to contact and communicate, engage the local community, the contracting community, the industry on some of the contracting opportunities of all of the packages that are coming up. A big portion, or I should say, a component had to do with advising the community, the contracting community, about the small business policy. We wanted to make sure that we were providing ample access and opportunities to micro-business, certified small business, certified disabled veteran business, and disadvantaged business enterprise business owners. It also provided us the opportunity as well to interact with the prospective small business and the prime contractors, the teams that are forming. Most importantly, I think as well, or as equally important to us, is, again, getting to know the small business partners, the practitioners in that local community who provide technical assistance to the small business community there in the Valley. The forum itself in Fresno was held at the Safe Mart Center. Its particular structure was such that we opened with remarks from the authority representatives and local officials, which was followed by a very, very comprehensive overview of the project, the procurement process, delivery method, and the schedule of the project. We also presented the small business policy, of the authority with clear information advising them about our 30% goal, how that would be achieved with certified small business firms, the certifications that were recognized, and the participation counted towards that goal at all tiers. We're very, very happy to have been joined in this event by many of our resource partners. I'll apologize to anyone on this list who we may have left off, but a strong partner is the U.S. Small Business Administration. The local Fresno district office, Carlos Mendoza is their director, an outstanding champion for small business. The U.S. Department of Commerce, the Minority Business Development Agency, the California Department of Veteran Affairs. Stuart McKinsey, representing California Department, was there handing out information to ensure equal opportunity participation of our certified disabled veteran businesses. We received support from the Department of General Services, who I like to say is the business manager of California departments. They own and regulate, well, I should say, they own and operate the small business program. We also had a wide amount of support from the California Department of Transportation, Caltrans. As you know, they have small business advocates in each of the 12 districts that they represent statewide. We had a lot of support from the city of Fresno. Beth McDonald is the representative, the small business representative in the city of Fresno, who does a lot of work in certifying disadvantaged business enterprises. We also had, you heard about the speed dating, Leanne Egger from the EDCs. Again, a great supporter of our program there. She does a lot of what I call work off the scorecard. They don't show up in the score sheet. She just gets it done and supports our efforts there. So this particular project, or this particular forum, was August 14th. We had more than 648 folks attending that event, representing more than 450 small business firms. Again, we included overview of construction package 1, 2, 3, and 4. We'd like to talk briefly about the other events that were held. April 12th, we had a request for expression of interest forum held in Los Angeles. More than 1,100 registered guests representing more than 963 firms. On September 8th, 2011, another industry forum was held at the same place, Save Mart Center, in Fresno, with more than 900 registered guests representing 751 firms. On May 17th, 2012, the authority hosted Meet the Primes event featuring the 5 shortlisted firms at California State University at Bakersfield. Pleased to have had more than 650 registered guests representing more than 486 firms. From these forums, we as staff, we as practitioners, have heard many positive comments from the attendees, from practitioners, business owners. Among them, very, very briefly, applauding the board for its 30% small business goal. Again, this is inclusive of the 3% disabled veteran business enterprise and the 10% disadvantaged business enterprise goal. They were very happy with our board, the Chief Executive Officer, Jeff Morales, your vision and your leadership. This one does make me blush. They'd like to thank you for my appointment. But further, they appreciate the access that we have provided to the 5 shortlisted firms. This is unusual in some of the transportation, construction procurement that they're used to. The fact that we have 5 shortlisted, we've provided lists and contact information of those 5 listed with their small business representatives. It does tend to be a little confusing. So these forums really go a long way in helping us an opportunity to explain how that works. They have been very appreciative, and we're noted that they received emails, press releases that they felt were, in fact, effective in reaching the small business owners statewide. Those are particularly of interest. And lastly, they were happy with the layout. The program was conducive to engaging meaningful dialogue with these prospective design-build teams. Along with that, they were very willing. We welcome comments to what we know to be barriers for small business participation. This is a very short list, abbreviated list, one that, as you look at, is not new to anyone here. These are very, very common, very we know these exist at all levels, at all parts of the state. Access to surety bonding, access to capital, access to liability insurance is a function in many cases of financial stability. This is a barrier. Workforce selection, development, retention. That's the objective of this project, economic impact for the local areas, but statewide in the Central Valley, we know some of the issues and some of the challenges that these look to address. Non-union contractor participation, something that we are continuing to discuss. They look for assistance in business development, marketing. So we talk about no-cost technical assistance for small business owners, whether it's business services or employer services. They exist statewide. And helping them connect with them, bridge the need to the technical assistance is a very, very important part of my job and that of those practitioners who attend these events. Certification continues to be a very, very challenging issue for some of them. We've done several outreach events. We're looking at a certification workshop in 2 weeks in Fresno so that we can invite folks. They get there, they sit there at a computer. We actually will have them walk away certified from that 2-hour event. This is real hands-on. It's necessary. We're looking at supportive services that will provide that. We partner with the local small business development centers, the SBA practitioners, the Workforce Investment Board, the local WIBs. Again, all of this to introduce to our small business owners in that area, no wrong door. Prompt payment is an issue. When in fact you have these procurements, you're glad to see that. But beyond that, they got to get paid, and they got to be paid promptly. So what are next steps? These are issues that are going to follow. They thanked us for a lot of things and said nice things to us. They told us where they needed help, where challenges exist, what we can do to facilitate their participation. So we're looking at maintaining a strong and transparent communication protocol with all of the stakeholders, interested parties, community, and the business owners. We'd like to continue to host more of these industry forums, networking opportunities, pre-bid proposal conferences for the design-build and non-design-build contracts. Again, partnering with all of our stakeholders. They're participating in outreach events hosted by government agencies, chambers, and business trade associations. I'm happy to report I've gotten many invitations to attend these events, and I look forward to doing more of them on a regular basis. The website, there's obviously more we can do to communicate, to contact them. Business owners, by and large, don't have a lot of time to go to a website. They're making payroll come Friday, and to suggest, hey, just go to our website is not always the easiest for them. So when we can, provide information then through the website, make it simple, make it practical, make it helpful. We're continuing to do that. One of the items further on the list here is taking a look at a small business toolkit, which will give them a bag full of information to get to satisfying their needs as quickly as possible. For example, how to get certified. One of the most common issues is, I'm certified, now what? Informing them about the process, now what do they do? How do I increase the probability of success on bidding on a contract? We do have a couple of PowerPoints we're fine-tuning so that it's a step-by-step picture of how exactly to go about doing that. We are currently reviewing a memorandum of understanding with the U.S. Department of Commerce Minority Business Development Agency. Again, these are practitioners statewide who extend our services and our opportunities. We are looking at requests for proposal to select a consultant, possibly to provide small business development assistance. And finally, researching possible solutions to effectively address these barriers that we've talked about. From my standpoint of view, 30% small business goal is something that we are all strongly committed to doing. I, as well as the staff, our practitioners, our friends, our partners, are looking to be participants in that solution. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Padilla? Vice Chair Schenk.
Well, thank you.
On the screen.
Obviously, I'm very pleased to hear the compliments that we received, and I don't want to be a buzzkill, but was there any negative feedback of which we should be aware?
Well, I think, I don't know that I would say it's negative. A lot of it has to do with how to go about participating in these contracts. You know, I would love to say, yes, put your name down here, we'll call you, we will contract with you. In the case of the 5 shortlisted firms, helping them to navigate each of the 5, that's
So mainly the questions that you talked about.
Well, yeah, but, you know, here's 5 firms who are committed to doing outreach. You know, I have to go to all of them. I have to market all of them to because we don't know who's going to be awarded. That was negative. That was difficult for them to really try to do. But as far as what I did here, I think they're pleased we're doing everything we can.
Well, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Padilla, and welcome aboard. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is a presentation on Caltrain, the economic benefits of the Caltrain modernization program, and Mr. Hamlin.
Well, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, first let me say thank you for providing this opportunity for me to brief you on the economic impact study of Caltrain modernization that we did earlier this year.
I got to step out for a second.
Okay. My name is John Haveman. I'm the chief economist at the Bay Area Council Economic Institute, and we were tasked with looking at the economic impacts of modernizing Caltrain in a couple of different ways that I'll mention in a minute. First, let me back up and just talk about the system for a second. As you are all aware, I'm sure it's a system that runs through 17 cities, 3 counties, serves a population of approximately 3 million residents along the peninsula in the San Francisco Bay Area. Currently provides over 40,000 daily trips for folks, so we heard earlier that number is now approaching 50,000. In the vitally important high technology corridor of California, arguably the most economically, the fastest recovering economy in the Bay Area, in California. My apologies. Okay, so what's the project? Caltrain modernization. Caltrain modernization is made up of 3 different pieces, right? The first is getting new trains, electric trains, the electric multiple unit trains that are discussed. Second is the overhead contact system that will allow those electric trains to run on the system, which is now powered by diesel locomotives. And third is this installation of a positive train control system, a more modern signaling and train control system that will increase the efficiency and capacity of the system overall. And we looked at each of those pieces, although the electrical multiple unit train system less so because we went under the assumption that the trains would not be manufactured in California. The benefits that I'll mention here are lower than would be the case if in fact those EMUs were to be manufactured in the state of California. Right, so the modernization will lead to an upgraded Caltrain system, leading to trains that look much like this with overhead wires, as you can see in the pictures. So the cost of the project is broken down into the 3 different pieces. One is the electrification infrastructure, the catenary system, $785 million. The advanced signaling system is another $231 million. The EMU trains, including a bunch of professional services regarding their installation locally, amounts to about $440 million. In total, $1.456 billion. Okay. The economic benefits are derived from three different pieces. The first is the local jobs and economic activity that will accrue during the construction, during the installation of the advanced signaling and the overhead electrical system. Second is the changes in real property values for those who live in close proximity to the station. By being able to access a faster, more efficient, more frequent service, real property values will in fact be enhanced significantly in those regions. Third is the economic value associated with improved service. As I mentioned, there are some 40,000 to 50,000 people who ride the trains. If you increase the speed with which the trains carry these folks, they in fact, over the 30-year useful life of the upgrade, will experience fairly significant economic benefit that I'll bring up in just a second. First, the construction impact. Right? While construction is underway, about $1.1 billion of that $1.456 will be spent in the Bay Area. Right? So the resulting impact of that $1.11 billion in construction expenditures is approximately 4,500 FTE job years in the construction sector alone. Okay, so these are 4,500 not jobs necessarily created in the economy, but the equivalent over the course of the project. And this is in the construction sector, which is a sector that was very heavily hit by the recession that we experienced. There are some 50 to 60,000 unemployed construction workers in the Bay Area alone at this point. So it will also create almost 9,600 full-time equivalent jobs in total. So that's another 5,000 jobs in addition to those primarily in construction. The addition to economic output, GDP essentially, for California is $951 million. The second area of positive benefit is in property value impacts. As I mentioned, those who live in close proximity to the stations will experience a significant increase in the value of their properties. That increase in the value of their properties comes primarily from the enhanced service in the form of faster trips and more frequent service for those living in those neighborhoods. In addition, environmental factors such as improved air quality, fewer vibrations, less noise, because of the switch from diesel to electric locomotives. Another benefit is the increase in property values will also have an effect on overall property tax collections. We estimated property tax collections over the course of the 30 years will increase by approximately $76 million. So the total value of the Caltrain modernization program resulting from increased positive values, property values is nearly $1 billion, $904.5 million. So the total impact, the overall economic benefits are up to $2.5 billion. We employed a variety of assumptions, the vast majority of which were extremely conservative with respect to leading to economic benefit. Some assumptions, a 5-minute increase in service would lead to an economic benefit of a little bit under $2 billion. If there were a full 10-minute increase over the span of the system, benefits would be up to $2.5 billion. The 9,600 full-time equivalent job years are not dependent on the increase in quality of service. They just come from the construction. Property values located near the system, about $1 billion. Benefits to riders that I alluded to earlier, we calculated that would reap about $371 million in time savings for riders over the course of the next 30 years. Increase in property tax revenues by up to $59 million, and a generation of about $71 million in state and local taxes. Other benefits that we did not quantify include environmental, the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, and the second, the electrification and modernization increases the ridership capacity on the overall system. Ridership is now in the 40 to 50,000 rider range. It's anticipated that ridership will be up in the 75,000 range by the end of in the next 20 to 30 years. Modernizing the system will help to achieve and supply that service. Third, the improved service will in fact attract more riders, increase revenue, and pull people off of the streets, reducing congestion in a very congested area. Finally, increased demand for transit-oriented development near the stations is very highly likely to ensue, which is very important for development in the region going forward. Finally, I'll just say that modernization will help bring the Caltrain system into the modern era in which it's now functioning, which is more consistent for the vision of transportation and transportation facilities in the Bay Area and throughout California. So that's what I have. I want to thank you very much for your time, and I will be happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Dr. Haberman? Mr. Hart? Dr. Hartnett.
Dr. Haberman, thank you. I just really want to comment that I've had an opportunity to previously see this study, and I think it's very well done. I agree with you that the assumptions are conservative. But it demonstrates the real effect of investment in our transportation system and what it means directly and indirectly. And so I think this is a great tool, not just as you look at Caltrain modernization, but as you look at the investment of transit and transportation dollars. So thank you for doing the study. I think it's an important part of our understanding of the impacts of the investments that California is making.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Dr. Haberman, for being here and for your presentation. Thank you, sir. We'll move on to agenda item number 5, which is the agricultural impacts process presentation by Colonel Bond.
Good morning, Mr. Vice Chair, Mr. Chairman, board members, Mr. Morales. My name is Bart Bond, and I work for the Regional Consultants Outreach Team for the section of the project from Fresno to Bakersfield. And I'm here today to talk about our efforts in ag outreach. I'm joined today by other members of the outreach team. Mr. Craig Schmidt is here, and he works for Mr. Valines, Mr. Mike Valines. And a member of your staff has been particularly helpful in this. Patricia Jones has helped us with the outreach effort, as well as our consultants that work with us at all our public meetings, and they're also represented here today. As you know, agriculture is a vital part of the San Joaquin Valley. This is a very different picture than the one you've had in a previous item talking about an urban setting. In the rural setting, we have the 2 top producing agricultural counties in the nation along our alignment. Like State Route 99, I-5, and other major projects, the high-speed rail project touches hundreds of agricultural parcels. And that's really the focus of our talk today. While land values may be generally higher in the cities, agricultural land acquisition usually involves significant operational considerations and substantial infrastructure. In my experience with Caltrans, it turns out that those last 2 items, those operational considerations and substantial infrastructure that needs to be modified or replaced or moved or accessed, those things often are more costly than actually buying the land in rural areas. Our current outreach strategy has been to make formal presentations to the public, to use boards, to use PowerPoint presentations, and we've been focused on the property owner rights and benefits, legal basis for eminent domain, the key steps in the right-of-way process, the valuation process, and the process milestones. We have generally not used real examples or graphic examples of impacts or possible outcomes. So what happens in a public meeting is as soon as we have finished our presentation, property owners herd us over to the maps and point to the map, and they would like to see actually what happens to their land. What are the issues? What are the considerations? What are the features? And we go into a one-on-one discussion at length in many cases, talking about those issues. We want to talk about a recommended outreach strategy. And the first point is we're going to continue much of the effort that we have been pursuing.
We'll continue to provide accurate information and seek ways to reduce uncertainty with enhanced outreach. And uncertainty is the major factor that we probably deal with in this event, in this case. We'll continue to discuss property owner rights, benefits, and land acquisition process in our presentations. We'll continue to stress the point that each land acquisition action is unique and can only be resolved through an iterative process between the property owner and the right-of-way agent. Now, this is really important because at this point, you can't go in and at a public meeting with engineers, with right-of-way agents, with outreach people there, and you can't come to a final conclusion as to what might happen to someone's property or what the value might be. This has to await this iterative process that occurs after selection of an alignment. And much of it is based on a decision that the property owner himself or herself must make in terms of what their options and which options they intend to choose. So what's new today? Well, we'd like to present to you a program by which we would develop and present graphical examples of typical agricultural land acquisition scenarios and a reasonable range of possible outcomes. And there is a range because nothing will be definite until that iterative process occurs. And then we'd like to take that to groups in the agricultural community, farm bureaus, industry groups, and other groups to discuss those things. A few areas of key impacts: access. We have access from farm facilities, access from farm facilities to public roads. We have access between sections of a property owner's farm, and we have access by emergency and school vehicles. We have wells. Wells, in some cases, are on our alignment. They're within the footprint, and they need to be replaced. Irrigation systems are everywhere. There are two levels of irrigation systems that we deal with. One is the wholesale storage and delivery of water across the valley, and we deal with dozens of irrigation districts, water supply districts, ditch companies, conservation districts, that sort of thing. They run the major distribution system that moves the water to each property owner. That system has largely been addressed in the design work to date, showing how those canals and ditches will cross our alignment, which canals will be realigned, that sort of thing. The second part of that is what happens to the individual property owner's irrigation system. Every parcel virtually has its own separate irrigation system, and we will impact many of those at that level. And again, that's a subject that will be handled in this negotiation between the right-of-way agent and each individual property owner. And then there's the viability of parcels. We'll have remnants, we'll have parcels that are bisected, and each of those will have to be discussed individually. Now, there's several principles that we want to follow in this process. Let me touch on very quickly. One, we're going to comply with all the laws and rules and regulations that are associated with the right-of-way process, and they are extensive. We intend to make sure that the implementation of mitigation measures and design features that are listed in the EIR, EIS are certainly carried out. Let's see here. We will be consistent with the practices of Caltrans and other public entities in terms of the way the right-of-way actions and land acquisitions handle. The outcomes, as I said many times already, will be based on those negotiations between the property owner and the right-of-way agent. And again, many property owner decisions are associated with that negotiation. We also want to be proficient in two other areas that we think are very important in working with the ag community, and they involve understanding of the agricultural operations and utilizing local knowledge and expertise. Okay, let's
let's get on to the graphical examples. I'll show you 3 slides. The first one will show you a typical scene in a rural agricultural area without the project, before the project comes along. We'll talk a little bit about some of the features on that slide. Then we'll go on and we'll apply the high-speed train footprint across this scenario and add an overcrossing, a road overcrossing footprint to show you some of the factors that we deal with in some cases. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about the complexities of multiple owners in a particular area. This first slide is the slide without a project, and basically it's a very, very simplified slide that shows a mix of fields, of parcels, different sizes, different crops, orchards, vineyards, row crops. Shows some buildings. The symbols that look like arrows are there to represent homes and buildings out in this area. And we show a part of an irrigation system in the lower left-hand corner.
What are the circles?
The circles would represent rows of trees in an orchard. And could be almonds, they could be anything, just to tend to represent that those are row crops, and they have special requirements in terms of access. The other feature here on the right side, going up and down, is a typical county road out in ag land. Now, the thing you'll notice about this particular scenario is that everything is rectilinear, it's north-south, east-west. This is the easiest situation, it's the most common situation, where the boundaries of the parcels are defined by the section lines. Section lines occur every 1 mile, 1 mile spacing, and those sections, and you might think of that large square that takes up most of the slide as a section, 640 acres, it's often divided into quarter sections and then further divided into fields of 20 acres, 40 acres, 68 acres, or 80 acres. And this is the kind of situation that we deal with. There's no scale on this, and we're going to talk, and this one has been simplified, so we have taken out the factor of a meandering canal going through it, which complicates a lot of things. So we've tried to make this fairly simple. Okay, now we want to move on and we want to apply the footprint of the high-speed train project and the footprint of an overcrossing. The high-speed train project, double-tracked right away at grade, cuts across this area diagonally. Now, the best situation we know when we're out in rural areas is that we can locate our alignment adjacent to an existing freight railroad on a long, straight stretch and stay with it as much as possible. This really creates the least impact. Unfortunately, eventually we get forced off of that alignment because of other features we want to avoid or sharper curves in the existing freight railroad. The second option that's best is to stay on a section line or parallel to section lines, whether it's east-west, coming across the valley, or north-south, heading down the valley. And again, you can see that if the alignment were on one of those section lines, then the land acquired in each parcel would be a fairly uniform, a rectangle or a long strip or that sort of thing. That tends to do have less impacts. We also have less impacts if we're away from existing state highways and county roads, because that causes all kinds of roadway design configurations to get people not only up and over the alignment, but also to the road that is going over top of the alignment. So the diagonal crossing here is probably the most challenging case we have when we go through ag lands. Without pointing out specifics, you can see many places where we have small triangles that get cut off of a field. There are several things that can be done with those. We can explain to the ag community that many of those small remnants could be used by the project for power stations, for communication sites, or even stormwater retention basins. In other cases, the original owner may want to keep them because he or she has adjacent lands and can incorporate it into their existing agricultural operations. In another case, if the existing owner isn't interested in being able to use that remnant parcel, then it would be sold off as a remnant to existing other property owners in the area where they can incorporate it into their farms. And we see several cases here. Access from the sites shown as building sites on this map could include having to buy land for access roads if we landlock a home or a farm operation, or an easement to get out to the public roads. But in any case, we're never going to leave a property owner with their property landlocked. Sometimes we have to get around our high-speed train alignment. Sometimes we have to get around the embankment that you see here shown as kind of a brownish footprint that carries the county road up and over the high-speed rail system. Access also involves outer direction travel. In this scenario, it's no longer easy to travel north-south from field to field. If you cross the high-speed train alignment, you are, in many cases, forced to go to the nearest grade separation and come over our alignment. This introduces the potential issue of creating, in some cases, very specific agricultural crossings for the use by private property owners when justified. When the outer direction travel is extensive, or when there are large holdings, or when we separate a large part of the operational part of the farm from a lot of the fields. So many, many different cases and many examples here that we have to deal with. Irrigation systems, while they're not shown here, every parcel generally has its own unique irrigation system. If you hit a well, we're going to replace the well. Other systems can be routed underneath our alignment. If the well is not hit, in this case, it's still able to function, we can route the pipes and stuff under our alignment, and we can route ditches and canals and stuff under our alignment. But there is an irrigation system in every one of those parcels. Any questions with this slide before we finish up here? Thank you. The last slide I'm going to show you just introduces the complexity of multiple owners. And the right-of-way agents, who I've worked with extensively in the past, indicate that the final resolution may involve multiple owners. It may be that owner one works out a deal with owner two to sort out swapping land or selling land or buying land to reconfigure his or her farm. Property owner 3 may work out a deal to buy land that is landlocked from property owner 1. And again, that's all part of that iterative negotiation process that will occur between the right-of-way agents and each individual owner. And that's why I say that there are many decisions an owner has to make in this process to resolve what actually turns out to be the final solution. And with that concludes the presentation. Do we have any questions?
Before I turn to my colleagues for questions, I want to say, Mr. Bond, that I certainly appreciate this effort. I want to congratulate you and also Mr. Morales and his team. No one is going to pretend that at the end of the day we can build a system like this that is not going to have impacts. But as I've traveled through the valley, one of the big problems we've had is just the tremendous level of uncertainty that people have about the potential impacts on their system. I mean, the first day I met Mr. Oliveira, he just kept asking the question, which I couldn't answer, which was, how am I going to work both sides of my orchards if you come through here? And I think that while you pointed out, and it's very important, that we're not able to answer specific questions about specific parcels of land until we have the completion of the environmental process. What you're endeavoring to do here is to at least try to reduce some of the uncertainty and questions that people have. I think my sense in the valley right now is that that growers I just can't even imagine whether we even understand their irrigation systems or how we could replace them. So I think that by trying to indicate that this is very much in our mind, that this can be done and will be done, again, the specifics for each parcel have to await the completion of the environmental process, but I think this is an important effort of respecting the public's concerns by reaching out to them and showing that we're thinking about different hypothetical situations that will ultimately lead to specific resolutions. I think my only comment on this is I recall reading in the article that Tim Sheehan wrote about his travels to Europe to look at the high-speed rail systems there, and talked about some of the impacts and the way that they had been handled along the lines of what you're talking about today. Private access, underpasses through the system, facilitating land swaps and so forth. And so I think I would only offer the thought that in addition to these graphical representations, without suggesting that anybody's going to travel over there to take pictures, but if we can prevail on our partnership relationships with the European operators to maybe send us some concrete examples. Obviously, our growing regions are different in some respects, but there may be some commonalities where we can show people how things have been resolved in other places. Again, I'll end where I started. No one's going to pretend that at the end of the day there aren't going to be some impacts on some businesses and farms. Of course there will be, but I think if we can work with people to give them a better understanding of what the possible outcomes are, that it's a very important effort. So I appreciate your work and that with your team on this. Sorry to start with that discourse, but I thought that was important to get on the record. Mr. Morales, did you want to add something here?
Yes, following on your point, I think that issue of uncertainty really is a major reason for having developed this presentation, which will now be available more widely and will be used in outreach as well as being on our website, and will help guide discussions with potentially affected property owners. One of the points that Bart made and you reinforced, which I really want to reinforce as well, is that there are established procedures for dealing with these types of issues, and there are real-world examples of how they have been dealt with, not just in other high-speed rail systems, but that these kind of processes are the same ones that Caltrans used in Building 99. There are expansions of 99 going on now where these exact same issues are being dealt with. We need to do a better job of getting information out to people, but we also need to make sure they understand that we're not creating new processes here. We're utilizing existing ones that they, in many cases, are familiar with, or at least the local governments are familiar with.
And to that end, Vice Chair Richards reminded me that, Bart, your background includes being a district director in Caltrans, or Jeff reminded me of that, and retired Army Corps of Engineers person. So I know you're well familiar with these, and we're very pleased to have you helping us with this.
I was trained by great Caltrans right-of-way agents. So I'm not a right-of-way agent. I don't play a right-of-way agent, but I was trained by a great right-of-way staff.
Could I just, on the point of right-of-way agents, again, another point that I don't want to gloss over is wherever possible, our priority is retaining locally based right-of-way agents who are familiar with the local communities, understand the operations there. And that's an important element of this, because we want people who understand the operations, in many cases who know the actual property owners and their histories there, working with them through these issues.
Thank you. Questions from my colleagues? Vice Chair Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would certainly echo your comments. I think what's encouraging here is we may not contemplate all the questions at the outset, but it's clear from the presentation and what's been done here, what you're showing as alternatives that we can deal with, and what's been done around the world, is the fact is there are solutions. And the solutions are what I think is encouraging for those people who are being affected by this right-of-way or who will be affected by the right-of-way. So your outreach and what you're doing with the right-of-way people, with Patricia, along with what you're doing, Robert Padilla, on the other side with the people who are going to be staffing the construction of this project, is the right direction for this authority to be going. And I applaud the efforts on both sides. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Just watch out for that Schmidt guy. I know him pretty well. Thank you very much, Mr. Bond. Appreciate that. Next, also sticking with the issue of the impact of the project on the critical agricultural sector of our state. Mr. Morales, this is a presentation on agricultural white papers. You want to introduce this?
Let me just, this is really a continuation of the theme here in terms of looking at the potential impacts in the valley and on agriculture in the valley. An agricultural working group was put together over a year ago to look at some of the issues that are most commonly raised about potential impacts on agriculture. And we wanted external review of that and be able to go out and provide information again to be able to help answer some questions of people of what potentially might happen, what might be folklore or mythology, what might be real, and how those impacts can be dealt with. And so a group was put together to determine what were the most common kind of themes and questions that came up, and then to look into those issues. And we have today the presentation from that group, which again, John Diener has been the chair of it, and it is external to the authority. It's really meant as a resource to the ag communities in assessing these issues.
Thank you, Mr. Morales, and thank you, Board, for having us. I was hired about a year and a half ago to help bring together a group of people to help answer questions, and I think Mr. Morales was just talking about a lot of those questions of what happens to my property and that type of thing when it happens, and they wanted to have somebody that had an agricultural background to help articulate that, but also bring resources in from the agricultural arena to help answer some of the other questions that probably might not necessarily be pertain to a normal right-of-way process, things that might happen along that way. So the group was formed. Jeff Abercrombie has been very helpful bringing that group together, and the folks, Arts Group, URS has really helped a lot in helping us bring together the professionals we need for that. So anyway, we were formed in 2011 in July, and the purpose was to write some white papers to answer key questions along the way, and called upon agricultural organizations, associations for peer review of those white papers, which were solicited. These peer comments have been reviewed by the Ag Working Group. In many instances, the information provided has been used to enhance the white papers. So we reached out to the University of California, to private individuals that were involved in various levels. We came down to basically 6 questions. There were questions that were solicited from the affected people along the rail. They submitted those questions to us, and we had to basically distill those down into what we have found to be about 6 different areas to talk about, and they're by no means are they definitive as the final answer, but they are a good outline from which to build on if there are other things that come up in the right-of-way process, because we do have those specialists available to us to do what we need to have done. The goal was to define it, so we did that. We got the resource people from, like I said, University Extension, as well as universities, basically Davis, Fresno State, were the 2 universities where we drew upon most of those specialists, but also the Ag Extension Service along that way. We entertained the local ag commissioners to bring their input into from the Department of Pesticide Regulation, because they are the implementers of those rules and regulations throughout agriculture. While they elected not to participate in the committee, they did comment and they did have input as we went forward, as they didn't feel comfortable being part of the committee. So basically the 6 areas we looked at were bees and pollination, the induced wind effect, dairy impacts, movement of equipment. As you saw, Bart had the scale of the farm that was on the land with 4 different owners and having to move around. Irrigation obviously is a key issue, is how that's going to be handled, and pesticide use, what effect the rain might have. As I said, they were from different areas. The papers were reviewed after they were written by peer review people from organizations outside of the university as well as university people. Farm Bureau had purview of all of these papers prior and made comments, and the comments were incorporated as necessary. One of the big questions was what happens when the high-speed rail comes through and you're pollinating your almonds in the springtime. And so we found, because we did have interaction with the people from Europe and Japan, and also the engineering on the speed of the wind, that there was 2 mile an hour at the edge of the right-of-way, and as such shouldn't impact that. We found through our research that 12 miles per hour for honeybees is kind of a range where they quit moving around as much. But all those things that were impacting the bees were more of an environmental thing. As you can see in this particular picture here, honeybees normally are placed in kind of a quiet spot away from high traffic areas, and beehives are usually not placed directly next to the thoroughfares of highways or railroads as they are today. One of the questions was the fact that what do you do with the wind that comes off the train? Well, again, like we said, that do the engineering, the style of the train being as it's aerodynamic, we're not to exceed about 2 miles an hour at the edge of the right-of-way. So that being said, the fact is that with the fact that the right-of-way is going to be rock, there shouldn't be huge issues with dust, huge issues with wind, things of that nature. One of the questions was the fact that the train goes so fast that they're going to blow the blossoms off the trees. One of the papers that you can read here that we're releasing today, we contracted one of the manufacturers of the Aerofan spray rigs that are used to spray the blossoms in the springtime for fungicides, and the fact is that the wind coming out of the fan on that's 140 miles an hour, and that doesn't blow the flowers off the trees. So I guess at 2 miles an hour we're not doing too bad. So anyway, the minimal dust, all those things have been looked at. These are things that give us the format to go forward with the negotiations. One of the areas that is impacted in the process that obviously depends on, quite honestly, like what Bart had up on the map, depends where it lands in relationship to the dairy. It can have a greater or a lesser impact on that dairy. Quite honestly, each dairy is a unique situation. We look at it from the aspect of noise. The fact that we're dealing with a electric train instead of a diesel engine train that BNSF currently runs. We're much quieter than that. Looked at the behavioral practices. The university people commented on that. That's in the white paper. Sudden sounds are of concern. The electromagnetic frequency effect is an issue in that, but we're far enough away from where the dairy's animals usually are in the situation where that should not have any measurable effect on that from the research that we did. Dairies usually are in a quiet place because cattle like that, but they have a constant thing. Quite often there are the common noises of the day going around, and anyway, as you can see, we've looked at that part. One of the other issues that's more common in the whole process is what do you do about turning around? How do you have a setback? What is the true right-of-way necessary for the train in relationship to the husbandry of the day? And so we've gone through and tried to identify that with people that are involved in the equipment business, looking at bridge weights, DOT regulations, manufacturing regulations in relationship to what's legal to be hauled down the road within the parameters of Caltrans as well as the United States Department of Transportation. How high they can be, all those things are considered. Having Jeff Abercrombie on there, having been part of the Caltrans engineering team, is very helpful because he knew those regulations, was very helpful in the input into that part of the deal. So we've worked on the movement of ags. The delivery systems and irrigation, again, as Bart said, but even as far as canals and canal companies, this project's going to take a period of time to get put in place. A good lot of these irrigation districts are cyclic in nature. There's going to have to be a specific construction done at the appropriate time when water's not in the system to create the system so that it's not closed down during the irrigation system, because during the irrigation season or the irrigation run for that. And those are normal things that are accommodated through Caltrans and others that do these kind of constructions. And needless to say, we looked at these and didn't feel that there were any circumstances different than the normal right-of-way issues that might come from that. As you can see here in this particular picture, the turnaround area at the end of the rows on these trees is an effect of this right-of-way that belongs to the water district here. You can see that the irrigation canal was constructed on the contour in the days when they didn't probably have as sophisticated as equipment as we do today, and as such it doesn't go straight, it curves through that orchard, so those accommodations had to be made in the engineering on how the irrigation system worked within this particular almond orchard. And given the light that this is an open water situation, it also gives you the idea of the issues that come from the DPR, which is mitigation or elimination of drift off site. So when you're spraying these trees, whether it's on herbicides on the ground level or fungicides and insecticides on the tree level, you're not allowed to drift into a water source that goes down the creek to somebody else and affect somebody else's situation. Not unlike the Delta in California today, trying to work through all those issues. So that is kind of some of the things that we looked at in that particular situation. Pesticide use, again, and a comment on that previous slide because it was a good example. High-speed rail is going to be in the alignment of the right-of-way currently by the train. Obviously, there's some places because, like Bart said, the curvature or the engineering doesn't allow the turn to be as tight as the turn that would be on a normal 60-mile-an-hour train. And at that point, you end up with some new land that gets incorporated into a right-of-way. As such, though, still there are no conditions that we see that the ag commissioners would be allowing or anything of that nature, people to do spraying. Today, the limitation is that you're not supposed to spray in winds of over 10 miles an hour. And so all those things being said, the proper setback for the right-of-way should compensate for that, and the responsibility of the landowner that's currently there for the highways, the waterways, and the current railroad systems are no different than what happened today with the high-speed rail. We offer these white papers to the community to review, comment as framework, obviously trying to stimulate discussion, and are more than willing to make adjustment to those as see fit. Obviously, we've called upon our research partners to help bring these forward, so hopefully we've got an adequate base of research behind them. It doesn't mean that it's all-inclusive, but at that point we think we've made a professional presentation here currently to help move forward the high-speed rail's mandate of being responsive to the communities that are being affected by this. And for that, I would like to thank you. I'd like to thank Jeff Abercrombie and URS for supporting the group that I was in part of, and obviously the board for supporting all of us in this work. Are there any questions?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Mr. Diener. We appreciate your work in this regard. It's very important. I had one or two quick comments, but let me first turn to my colleagues to see if they have questions or comments. Vice Chair Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Diener, I appreciate very much the reports. I think, as you know, we've been anxiously awaiting these. I think for people from other parts of the state, these are issues that you've discussed today that many Californians wouldn't have thought of or understood. But those people out in the audience today and those around the state who are involved in agriculture clearly understand the concerns that are being answered to some extent with these reports. And I'm happy with the final comments you've made, and that is, where do we go from here? Yes. And the fact, as I understand it, you would be looking now for public comment. I would assume a lot of that would come from the ag community to either question the reports or the results that you have identified, but with the ultimate purpose of ensuring that what we are providing to the ag community is accurate information, supportable by the research that those you've contacted have provided, and acceptable and understandable to the ag community as we work through this process and this project. Thank you very much, John.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. I want to reiterate the fact is that we probably had 400 or 500 questions. Some of these questions came out of the initial release of the EIR. There were a lot of different concerned people that came, and we kind of boiled it down to the 6 areas. There may be some other areas that need some refinement, but anyway, I do appreciate that. Thank you.
And to understand the process, then, do you remain in place as the head of this ag working group? So you will be
yes.
All right. Fine. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Of course. Other questions? Well, I had a question and then an observation. But the first question is similar to something I raised before, which is that even though we're the home in California to probably the world's greatest agricultural growing region, we know that high-speed rail systems around the world have gone through some very productive ag lands. And are these conclusions in your white paper consistent, as far as you know, Mr. Diener, with experience in Europe or Asia or other places where high-speed rail systems have been built?
Yeah, we were in contact with the people from Japan, which actually go through a lot of small acreage farmers in the rural areas. I mean, and if you would think about it, I suppose, and I don't know what the right number is, but probably 80 to 90% of all high-speed rail is in a pastoral situation and not in a urban situation. And as such has had to traverse any number of different areas. We worked with people from the information from Spain and from Belgium on the wind. There are several different places that we've looked at and brought that in as part of that. And I guess as a farmer, it's fairly interesting in my mind to think of what it would cost to build a new highway system equivalent to haul the people, and being mindful of the impact on the land and the amount of land being dedicated to the high-speed rail in relationship to what it would cost in land to take out land for another 4 or 5 lane freeway to haul the 50 million people that we have in California around. I think we have a far less impact environmentally with the high-speed rail. There are those that don't agree with that, but I think if you really peer into the engineering and dynamics of this, I think we have quite a lot to say in a positive way for what this brings to the valley. And for that, I thank you.
Let me just make this observation, and thank you for your work on this. I'm not a farmer, and I'm not a person who has a background in agriculture. And so there's a lot to learn for those of us who are decision makers up here. But in times that I've been traveling around the valley, these are questions that do come up, and so I echo what my colleague said about the importance of getting this information out there. I just also wanted to let you know that, based on your work, we've been reaching out to our colleagues at the California Department of Food and Agriculture, and I've met a couple of times now with Secretary Karen Ross, who is a very dedicated, just a very skillful administrator. We're continuing those conversations, in fact, even today. And one of the things that concerned me as I toured, particularly in Kings County, which, as you know, is right in the middle of the dairy belt, was the issue of re-permitting of waste ponds, loss of permissible head of dairy cows as a result of land takings and so forth. And we had committed that we would be trying to work on those issues. And in fact, later today, we're starting first conversations within the administration to look at some type of regulatory issue management around this. So I think in terms of not just the physical impacts on the dairies, which I know in your white paper you've looked at, but we're going to be spending additional time with our colleagues at Food and Ag and Office of Planning and Research to really try to see if there are regulatory impacts on the dairy industry that we can work to mitigate.
Sure. And I'll say this for the dairy industry, that the type of agriculture that dairy is in relationship to field crop agriculture or orchard agriculture is you are dealing with live animals, and you have a lot of logistics that are completely different than in a normal course of events for agriculture. And because of that, I think they do merit some special attention. As a committee, we've had long discussions with some of the dairy people that we've had involved in these papers as to what the right way to come at that. And obviously, from my perspective, we want that to be fair and equitable to those people that are impacted by that. And I think with the help of Secretary Ross and others, that we can probably come to some kind of reasonable accommodation there.
Great. Well, thank you again, sir. It's very important work. Oh, I'm sorry, Vice Chair.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Sorry, first of all, thanks for this. As an urbanite, my eyes were opened a long time ago by a long ago colleague, Rich Rominger, about the importance of agriculture to California, and so I've been sort of aware and exquisitely sensitive to this for many years. And what I want to make sure is that going forward that you also bring to us some of the knottier issues and what the folks in the Valley are saying to you. And we get it through my esteemed colleague here, but also on the ground,
sure,
the really legitimate and maybe not so legitimate complaints, concerns, so that we can begin to process and think about those too. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, were there other questions? Mr. Umberg.
Just a quick observation. Excellent presentation, both presentations excellent. And I mentioned to Mr. Morales, my only regret is we're not doing this in Fresno, where the local population and media could observe, and I assume you're going to do similar kinds of things in the area.
I think Jeff is the lead on that.
Right. All right. Thank you.
I see Mr. Sheehan walked up and took a picture, so I imagine that people in Fresno will hear about this at some point.
Mr. Chairman, the papers will now be available on the authority's website, and we will be coordinating an outreach strategy to also make them available, consistent with Mr. Umberg's recommendations.
Great. Thank you again, Mr. Dean. Okay, next item is Item 7, the High-Speed Rail Organizational Conflict of Interest Policy. Mr. Falens. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Mr. Morales.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just, before Tom starts, I want to put this presentation in context. Felt it was important as we are moving toward major contracts and starting to get under major contracts that we have a clear policy in place and known both to the authority as the contracting agency and to firms who are interested in participating going forward. Obviously, we have firms who are already under contract. Contracts can be very complicated in many respects in terms of multiple partners on a contract, both large and small and specialty firms. One of the purposes of this policy is to make sure that everyone is clear about what their participation on one contract might mean in terms of their eligibility to participate on a different contract, so that we do not get into conflict issues. So that's what this presentation is focused on.
Okay. I know since we're at that point in the year when baseball teams are driving towards the pennant, and some players sometimes will refuse to shave until they win the pennant, I presume that until we actually issue the contracts, you're going to continue to have the beard grow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good observation.
Mr.
With that, Mr. Chairman, board members, and Mr. Morales, thanks for giving me the opportunity to present this organizational conflict of interest policy. It's a policy that prescribes ethical standards for those that enter into contracts with the authority. It's really an important policy. It's been in existence 1 year now. When I first started with the High-Speed Rail Authority, this was being implemented, and we finalized it in September of 2011. So it has been in place, and we've been using it frequently. We have it on our website. We discuss it with those that contract with us. So it's an existing policy, but I guess it took a year for us to formally present it to you. The goals of this policy are integrity, transparency, competitiveness, fairness. We want to make sure that we provide a level playing field so that competition can take place for our contracts. We wanted to provide this policy so that it's informative for those that are entering into contracts with us, so they know how we look at conflicts of interest and how we would measure those. It also provides guidance. I have given you a copy of the policy itself, and as you can see, there's a table in the back that gives actual examples of situations, hypothetical organizational conflicts of interest, and also a table. It can be quite complicated and complex, and the way we set up this policy is that it's those that are in contracts with us monitor themselves, and they're required to monitor themselves. If they believe there is a conflict or potential conflict, they are to contact the authority and have a discussion about that with us, so we can work together to see if there in fact is a conflict, potential conflict, and if there's a way that we can change the structure of their company in terms of putting in mitigation measures that would allow them to continue to be in a contract with us or go into a procurement, or either to set up some process where they're allowed to compete. The definition of the conflict of interest is a circumstance where there's some sort of arrangement within the companies that would impair their ability to be impartial in their contracting relationship with the authority, or create some sort of unfair advantage as compared to others who want to enter into a contract with us. And it also could just be a perception of a conflict of interest. As I mentioned, they must disclose the matter to the authority if they think there is a conflict, and that requirement includes statement of facts and circumstances. Many of these questions as to whether there's a conflict that come to us are in the form of an email, sometimes formal letters. They're addressed to me as requested in the policy itself. I and others with legal backgrounds take a look at these. If we find that the facts and circumstances that they present to us are incomplete, or we don't understand all of them, we call them on the phone. We correspond back and forth in writing to try to get a clear picture of why they believe there might be a conflict. And then we work with them to see if there's a way that we can mitigate the conflict in some way, to allow them to continue to compete. Because the goal here is to create as much competition as available keep the opportunities for the business sector and the private sector open to contracting with us. The contractor's obligation is ongoing. A conflict can occur during a procurement, after a procurement, because of change of circumstances. There could be people that they hire or business relationships that they might enter into that could create a conflict that didn't exist when they first procured with the state. There can be severe consequences if there's a failure to disclose the conflict. It might preclude a contractor from participating in an authority procurement. And it could require the contractor to implement some sort of mitigating measures. Or we might be forced to cancel a contract because there is nothing we can do to cure the defect or the conflict that exists. If they become aware of a conflict and fail to disclose it, it could have created an unfair competition at the time of the procurement. We may decide to terminate that contract for default. There can be a serious consequence. So that's why it's important for contractors to continue to monitor and discuss with us if they think there's a potential conflict. There are three main areas that there are some restrictions. First of all, we've divided our design-build procurements into different sections, which are the same sections that are our environmental documents for purposes of measuring conflicts. So, for instance, a contractor or a consultant is prohibited from providing services in a design-build contract on the Fresno Bakersfield section if they've also provided services on the EIR or the preliminary engineering. Another area that we look at is whether they provided environmental services on any particular project section. And if they have to wait until the ROD is complete, which is the federal approval process, which follows the state approval process in the environmental documents. Once that's complete, then they can participate on a design-build team. This is a federal requirement. We don't want to jeopardize the loss of federal funds by not complying with their requirements. That is, there can be no contracts awarded on a design-build until the environmental process is complete. And then finally, there's also a consulting services contracts that we look at that are outside of the design-build process where conflicts could occur. All these conflict of interest evaluations are case by case, and we have to get a lot of information, as I mentioned, from the contractors. We have to understand there's some sort of relationships that they may have between their offices, because that could also impact our evaluation. And we also have to look at the professional responsibility rules that govern engineers. And as I mentioned, in the conflict of interest policy, we have a chart that tries to help them weed through whether there's a conflict. For instance, this is just part of the chart that shows the project management team and what contracts they are able to enter into, are precluded from entering into, and then where it's very factually dependent that they would work with us. I know Ms. LaCombs asked a question earlier about whether our policy is lacking in the ability to appeal, and I had a brief discussion with Mr. Morales. I'm going to take a look at that and consider whether there should be an appeal process and what that might look like. So I'll be looking at that and deciding whether there should be some amendment to the policy to address the concern that she had raised.
Yeah, I was. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I wanted to come back to that point, but why don't you finish the...
Any questions?
Yeah, I was also taken with Ms. LaComb's comment about appeal, and I don't know if we need to design a fix here. I think it is important to take a look at that. One thing that came to mind was the possibility that maybe somebody could issue a written appeal to the audit committee of the board, which could review it and work with the executive director, and if necessary, bring it to the board. I mean, I think we have a number of people on this board who are attorneys. I mean, generally in that world, conflict of interest actually can be tolerated if they're disclosed to all parties. And so in our case, if the public was aware that we were willing to say that in some extraordinary circumstance, et cetera, et cetera. So I do think that a good point has been raised there about due process. And so I guess I would ask the pleasure of the board if we could take action on this with a direction that staff come back to us. There's no action?
No, there's no action required for this. This is just a report to show you that
this is the report.
An existing policy.
Okay.
It's been out there for a year.
Then I think it would be appropriate to ask Mr. Morales, Mr. Flens to return to us to address the question that was raised by Ms. Lacombe today. Mr. Hartnett.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm in support of your comments, but in that regard, I do not think that we should frame it in the concept of due process. This is really a contractual issue, and so I think we want to be careful how we refer to it. Secondly, I think that a review of a decision could be available, but I think it's important that it be not an overly bureaucratic process, and so whether it's a review by the audit committee or something similar to that, or a committee of the board, other committee of the board, I think it's important that it be efficient, but one in which it's not like an arbitration, it's not like a mediation, each which is quite different, but is so there's somewhat of an ability to have a check and a balance, but I think we need to be careful how we set it up, if one is set up.
That's well said and better presented than my comments, and so I certainly would defer to that.
I wanted to mention also that the Department of General Services approves most of the contracts that we're talking about here, and that they have an appeal process. Right. So I need to look at that and see and make sure that we don't already have a process in place for all the contracts that we're talking about here. So she brings up a good point, and I'm going to prepare a response to that and present it to you at a future date.
That's good. Any other questions or comments, suggestions on this? Mr. Morales, please.
The language in question is pretty typical language for contracting agencies to have in place in various respects with regard to managing its contracts. I think where we may not have done as good a job as we could is kind of the principle behind it is that prior to having reached this decision, there would have been discussion with the firm perceived to be in conflict. So there is, a process, if you will, to evaluate that. What we're really speaking to here is once the determination is made, the authority has the sole discretion then to execute that decision. So if we need to go back and clarify kind of the front end of the process to ensure that there's at least an opportunity for a firm to try to demonstrate that there is not a conflict, we can do that, but I don't think we want to compromise the ability, once that determination is made, for the authority to make sure that the public's interest is being protected.
Agreed. Okay. Very good. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Flens.
Thank you.
Anything else on this?
No, I have the next two, so I'll stand here.
He's still not shaking.
Yeah.
That's true.
All starting at noon.
Okay, next is the approval to issue an RFQ for the construction management services contract.
Yes, this is a request to approve an RFQ for construction management, for project and construction management services for construction package number 1. That construction package goes from the Avenue 17 north of the San Joaquin River through the city of Fresno. There's going to be a significant amount of work overseeing this design-build contract that we're asking to issue a request for qualifications to ask for the services from the private sector to help us go monitor and provide oversight for the design-build contractor. It includes record-keeping, communications, quality, oversight, the whole list of activities there. It's it's going to be a significantly amount of work and quite a large project. We estimate the budget for this to be about $25 to $50 million.
Excuse me, Mr. Flins, 1 second. Sure. Ms. Toth, I'm trying to be cognizant of time. We have a time limitation here on this today. No, we're good? Oh, that was just that one. Okay, fine.
Okay. In the board packet, I've gone into more details of the types of services which would be in the scope of work for this RFP that this project manager service would provide. And we want to get them on board soon, and the reason is because we want them to help us with the evaluation of the RFP, the proposals that are being submitted for construction package number 1. They'll bring a lot of expertise with them, and if they can help us with the evaluation process, not in the evaluation of the award itself for the construction package number 1, but just the technical advice that they could share with those public board or public employees that would be making the decision or the evaluation of construction package number 1. Are there any questions about
this?
Yes,
Mr. Umberg had a question.
Mr. Flins, can you give me some examples of companies that might be bidding on this kind of thing? Are we talking about Big 8 or Big 4 accounting firm types? Are we talking about construction companies? Are we talking about what?
Well,
engineering?
they actually would be overseeing two major activities: engineering, the design portion of the design-build contract, and the construction part of it. So they would be probably a number of different firms coming together, similar to the design-build procurement that we have right now, to provide oversight, testing, quality control, those sort of activities. So we can envision that they would be a number of smaller firms maybe joining together to provide these types of services.
Engineering firms.
Engineering and construction management firms.
And I assume anybody that's qualified to bid on the large construction contract is disqualified from bidding on this.
Yes, because they could not oversee their own work. Correct.
Right.
So they'd have to have that independence. So that's part of the organizational conflict of interest exercise that we would go through.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Sort of have the feeling that we're the midwives at the birth of another bureaucracy here, layer upon layer upon layer, and it is concerning because when we have so many layers, it dissipates some responsibility. Can you tell me how we're going to avoid that and how we're going to integrate this so that it is as limited a bureaucracy as possible?
Maybe I could take a quick stab at this as I understand it and actually ask Mr. Morales to help also with this. But as you know, we have a contractor currently in place, the PMO, the Project Management Oversight Contractor. And my understanding is that we could have structured that contract broadly enough to include this kind of construction oversight management. But the decision was made at some point, I think before I was here, to break that out as a more specific, discrete function. So I think this is something that sort of laterally was pieced off that could have been part of the oversight contract that's there now. I'm not an expert in this, but I do know that when I was on the BART board, we were building the design-build project at BART San Francisco Airport. We did have a construction management function. I think Mr. Richards, who's in the development business, would say that it's pretty customary to have an owner's representative or somebody who represents the equity owners who's on site overseeing the actual construction function. So I don't know, Ms. Schenck, if that helps.
Well, I understand all that, and I was around when they did, but I'm talking more to the point of how do we make this seamless so that we don't have
people tripping over it.
Exactly.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, with that, I'll turn it to the people who run the staff to tell us how they're going to do that.
I guess trust us isn't the answer. No, several ways.
Right,
trust but verify. Several things. As was just noted, these services could have been potentially included in one of the other contracts. The decision was made to split them out. That does create another reporting mechanism, if you will, but we'll deal with that in several ways. And again, this is not unusual. We're not breaking new ground in doing this. As we build our internal team, the management team, that team will be overseeing these programs. We'll have direct reporting relationships from the construction manager as well as the existing program management team and the program oversight team. One of the things that our new risk manager, who's now on board, is looking at and will help us define very clearly is the best structure in order to ensure that we have the right accountability without undue duplication in that process. But we're outlining that process, in fact, in a report to the legislature that is due next month about what our management structure will be for all of these contracts going forward.
Mr. Hartnett.
Thank you. I had some of the same concerns as Vice Chair Schenk, and I know how important construction management services can be to projects even of a moderate size. So the size of this is such that there's no doubt in my mind that we need construction management services in the nature that's outlined in the request. To some extent, I think some of the services go beyond what we might expect in other projects. So it's a pretty wide-ranging scope of services. Also, even with respect to the design-build teams, the range of services that they're providing beyond just designing and building, as you look at your chart. And I think it's important for us to keep with our emphasis, as Mr. Morales has mentioned and the Chair has mentioned in previous meetings, that it's important that we have government people, meaning people as employees of the authority, making government decisions and not having consultants making government decisions. I know that's a theme that is part of the staffing up of the organization, but I think it's important that the oversight of the construction management services is done by authority employees with a clear reporting structure, and that can reach down as well to certain aspects of the work of the design-build team as necessary, because I do fear that I don't want the construction management services folks making decisions that the authority staff ought to be making. Obviously, there's tons of decisions they're going to make along the way, but I think we just have to be clear as to what authority the staff has. We have to have sufficient staff. We have to have sufficient reporting protocols that are timely so as to keep on top of this.
Well, let me suggest, hearing the comments that the Vice Chair made and Mr. Hartnett, the action requested today is to give the staff authority to go out with the RFP. I think that RFQ, excuse me. So I think that there'll probably be an opportunity before any contract would actually be awarded, and I would say it would be advisable for staff, and I know Mr. Morales well enough to know that he will take these comments to heart. So I think when this comes back before us, a detailed discussion about how such a construction management firm would operate, how it would dovetail with our existing management processes to make sure that the concerns, or I wouldn't say concerns, but that the cautionary notes and issues raised by our colleagues today be fully thought through and so forth. So I think that would be a very appropriate thing to do before we would actually proceed with the expenditure of public dollars on this, that the board would have these questions addressed that Ms. Schenk and Mr. Hartnett have raised.
Yes. You're correct, Mr. Chairman. In fact, the board policy requires that this come back to you for approval of the recommended company to provide these services.
Mr. Morales? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Chairman. We'll provide a full explanation and description of how that process will work and who will be accountable in providing oversight.
We need a motion on this to allow you to move forward?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry, it was moved by Mr. Umberg. Second by Mr. Hartnett. Please call the roll.
Vice Chair Schenk? Yes. Vice Chair Richards?
Yes.
Mr. Umber?
Yes.
Mr. Hartnett?
Yes.
Chairman Richard?
Yes. Okay, thank you. Last item?
Yes.
Next item on the agenda?
Okay, yes, I have the next item, and that's the delegation to the CEO.
Yeah, it's also the last item.
It is the last item, yes. As you can recall, recently this board delegated to Mr. Morales approval of interagency and cooperative agreements up to $5 million. There are a number of other agreements and contracts that this authority is going to be entering into because we're ramping up toward construction. And some of these have significant dollar amounts and some have more modest dollar amounts. So I thought it was appropriate to present to you and leave for your decision a consideration whether Mr. Morales should have increased authority. And I've included in your pack today on the 2010 July period, there's a detailed delegation of authority that's shown there that's to the CEO. And what I'm asking you to focus on is Part A on the delegation, which is the procurement piece of it. And I'm suggesting that the delegation be changed to allow Mr. Morales to have the authority to approve contracts up to $5 million. And the reason for this is because there's going to be quite a few more contracts. I think a $5 million mark is a reasonable amount considering the size of this project, the complexity, and the number of agreements or contracts that we're going to be entering into. It doesn't preclude Mr. Morales from presenting to you contracts under that value if he thinks it's appropriate to have you weigh in on it or to vote on it. So the types of contracts that we would be looking into, of course, we've already covered the interagency and cooperative agreements that you've given the authority up to $5 million for. There's also railroad agreements, utility agreements, and then just the architectural agreements, professional services agreements, goods and services, some sole source agreements that will be required from time to time. And so a lot of these contracts have to be approved by the Department of General Services. So they also are a piece of our contract approval process, so that they're very involved. All the in the board resolution that I prepared, there's also a direction to the CEO that all these procurements will be conducted in accordance with federal, state laws and regulations and policies and compliant with all applicable grant requirements. I might add in the delegation of authority resolution that I prepared, just so it mimics what had been in before, on the very end of the first page, it says the CEO was delegated the authority to approve and execute changes or amendments to contracts between $5 and $10 million.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Between $5 and $10 million to cumulative increases of 25% of the original contract amount. And I noticed in the previous delegation, the other words, or $250,000, whichever is greater, is included there. So if you look at the one from 2010, and you look at C, A, small c, Roman numeral 3, that's the one I'm focusing on. I'm missing a few words, and those would be or $2,500,000, whichever is greater.
Okay, Tom, you lost me here.
Okay. Or $250,000.
Okay. Why don't you refer to these by resolution number so you can
if you look at the resolution that I'm proposing to you, Resolution 1224, the one that you're voting on today, if you look at the last few lines, and you compare that to the one from 2010, which is A...
Wait a second before you go. Sure. When you say the last few lines, this is on 1224,
yes.
So
it says
this is the high-speed route, the CEO is delegated.
Delegated, right. Mm-hmm.
Execute changes or amendments between 5 and 10 to cumulative increases of 25% of the original contract amount.
Okay, and after that comma, if you add the words or $250,000, whichever is greater, it now matches the old delegation.
Okay.
I'm just missing those words or $250,000, whichever.
So you
is greater.
intended to carry over that language and missed a couple of words.
I noticed that was missing.
And the words would essentially put a numeric value there, or $250,000, whichever is...
Correct.
Greater?
Correct. And that was from the previous one.
All right. I have two other comments, but before we get to that, my colleagues, Mr. Umberg.
Thank you, Mr. Flintz. And I'm aware that DGS, Department of Personnel, have a very challenging, some would call painful process that doesn't provide Mr. Morales completely unfettered discretion. Having said that, though, I think it is important that he have discretion given the magnitude of the project. But the question to both you and Mr. Morales is, how onerous would it be for us to get a report as to all contracts above whatever it may be, say $1,000 every board meeting?
Oh, we could report that. Yes, that wouldn't be a problem.
Okay. I think that would be useful. I think it'd be useful for us, and there's nothing magical about $1,000, but what is $10,000 or whatever it may be. I suppose we need a figure to amend this, and I'll pick a figure, $10,000, that all contracts above $10,000 that in our packets each meeting that we get a report as to those contracts.
Okay. I think to clarify, it would be either new contracts or contract modifications at that level.
Exactly. Right.
Very good. That was actually along the lines of one of my two comments.
That's where I was going to.
Okay. So, yes, I think we all kind of gravitated towards the notion that there should be a reporting requirement. So thank you, Mr. Umberg, for that. I would just add one other small suggested modification, and that is that we exempt from this delegation of authority any contracts or amendments of any amounts with Mr. Morales' former employer, only because that has been a matter of public discourse, and I think that I don't know that we even anticipate any, but it just seems to me that would make sense. So,
okay.
So then that sounds like three changes to the resolution. The first one is to pick up the language that you talked about,
right,
of the an amount not to exceed $250,000, whichever is greater. The second would be to add a provision suggested by Mr. Umberg that the executive director will report to the board at each meeting a list of all new contracts or contract amendments exceeding $10,000 in value. And the third would be just a provision that the foregoing delegation of authority does not apply to any contracts with Mr. Morales' immediate former employer.
Okay.
Anybody have any thoughts or improvements on that? Mr. Hartnett?
I agree with those. I guess I know this goes without saying, and probably the administrative review has something to do with this, but the expenditures that are committed to have to be within our adopted budgets, and so it's and in the areas in which we've already approved. I think so. It's this is not unfettered discretion to enter into contracts, even though they're reported to us. There is a boundary to it, and so I know we know that, but I think it bears repeating.
So if a new Mustang appears in the director's parking thing with blue and gold trim, that would be suspect in your
That would be slightly suspect. Yes, especially with the customized license plate that might tip things off.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to suggest that we have language on that, or do you just want to state that for?
No. I think I just want to state that for the record. We don't have to have Mustang language.
Right. You can always tell when we've passed the noon hour and the blood sugar levels start to change. Vice Chair Richards.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just interested in Mr. Morales' reaction to the $10,000 threshold.
I think in the context in which it's raised, which is this is a reporting requirement, we track that already, so I don't think it's creating a burden, and it's certainly information that should be shared. So I'm perfectly comfortable with that.
Okay. Thank you.
So you are fettered.
Yeah, I am fettered. Yes.
Okay. So then we need a motion for the resolution as amended.
Yes. So, second.
Okay, it's moved by Vice Chair Schenk. It's seconded by Vice Chair Richards. Please call the roll.
Vice Chair Schenk?
Yes.
Vice Chair Richards?
Yes.
Mr. Umber?
Yes.
Mr. Hartnett?
Yes.
Chairman Richard?
Yes. Thanks, Mr. Flores.
Thank you.
We've come to the end of the agenda. Mr. Morales, I know that you had a discussion with me about an item that has customarily appeared in terms of the general manager's or the executive director's report, CEO's report, I should say, and you had some thoughts about how you want to proceed. I thought it would be good for you to share that with us.
Certainly, I know most people anxiously await the report at the end of each session. Because we're looking to work with the board to make the board meetings efficient and constructive and productive. And so basically what we'll be doing going forward is if there are items of sufficient interest, we'll have them as agenda items rather than presenting a separate report, or I'll raise the issues during the course of discussion. That's my proposal for that. Having said that, I would like to take just a moment, if I could, to introduce some of our new staff.
Yes, I was going to ask you to do that next.
Okay, and so I don't miss anyone, I'll ask them to stand up. I have Melissa White, who is our Deputy for External Affairs. Dennis Trujillo, who's our Chief Deputy. Diana Gomez, who's our Central Valley Director. Robert Padilla, whom everyone has met. Who am I missing? Anyone?
Rob is coming through the door.
Rob Wilcox, our Director of Communications. Karen Green-Ross is the Deputy Legal Counsel. Oh, and John Tapping, our Risk Manager, who is going to be a key part of our construction effort going forward. So we are making real progress in building up the organization with some really top-caliber people. I'm very pleased with that and proud of the folks we've been able to bring on board. And I just wanted to make sure everyone got to know them.
Well, thank you for that, and I want to express what I'm sure is the sentiment of the board to congratulate you on not only moving swiftly in the wake of the legislative authorization of our expenditures, but also with a fine hand for picking talent to bring these folks on. I know that there are one or two key positions left, the CFO and the Chief Program Officer, and I know from discussions with you that you're diligently pursuing these, and with those we'll really have rounded out the leadership team here at the High Speed Rail Authority. And since we're embarking on this major construction project, which, as the Vice Chair so aptly mentioned this morning, is the largest construction project in the history of California, it's really important that we have top talent doing this, and the board is cognizant of public commentary that we've been thin at the top ranks, and Jeff, it's just good to see you that you've stepped in very quickly and really started to put a top-notch team together, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just note Wendy Boykins, who's not in the room, but is our Chief Deputy for Admin as well. And I also do want to just note we are bringing on additional staff at the second and third tiers to actually who get the work done. New hires and people on loan or that we're bringing on from other agencies. So it is a rounding out of the team in order to ensure that we can deliver the program.
Great. Before we adjourn, let me just turn to my colleagues and see if there are any matters that members either want to report on, or questions, or issues for upcoming board meetings at this point. Well, with that, we thank everybody for today, and I think, again, we'll show that we're adjourning in the memory of the victims of the 9/11 tragedy. And thank you all very much. Meeting is adjourned.